So, all right, I went to the prayer breakfast. I have to talk about this first. And it was amazing. It was amazingly uplifting. You're just in a hotel with thousands of people of faith gathered together to talk about their faith experiences. There is a media dinner before. I spoke at that media dinner last year, and it was one of the most successful speeches I think I've ever given. But at the same time, it was nice to go back there and listen to other people without being terrified, having to speak in public. So I went to that, and then I went to the prayer breakfast where Trump and other congressmen and people of faith speak. Recently, because I'm preparing for what I hope will be the second season of Another Kingdom, I've been going back and reading a lot of the books that inspired me when I was younger about King Arthur and a lot of the legends from that period, because a lot of Another Kingdom takes place in a sort of pseudo-medieval world. And it's interesting when you go back and read classic literature, and I'm reading some of the philosophy that shaped me as a young person. I'm rereading a lot of things. And it improves your mind. And when I say that, what I mean is it gets you out of that Twitter, social media craziness where everything is about the moment and everything, and it suddenly returns you to the important things in life. Because the fact is, listening to Aristotle figure out what's right is more interesting and deeper and more relevant than listening to a brain scientist explain to you how the brain thinks about what's right. That's really interesting, and I'm thrilled we're doing it. I'm thrilled we live in a world of such scientific knowledge and technological miracles. But it's more important what Aristotle was actually doing. So going back into that world really is elevating. And the same thing was true with this faith gathering, is that when you talk to people, and I've noticed this before, but it really came home to me again. When you talk to people of faith, you are talking to people. They're not better than people of no faith. They don't pretend to be. They're not more moral. Anybody can be moral. Anyone can behave well. That's not the point. They are living a life that is deeper, richer, truer. The things they think about are more real, more relevant, more meaningful, more profound. I mean, and it doesn't matter whether they're intellectual people or non-intellectual people. When you sit and talk to them, you can talk to anyone about faith and have a deeper conversation. And sometimes in the mailbag we get these questions from people who think they're being clever. They raise what they think are paradoxes or contradictions or things that disprove faith, as if people haven't been doing that for thousands of years. They think they just came up with the big idea, but they send it to you. And the thing is, those questions do require intelligence and cleverness, but faith requires something much deeper and richer than cleverness and intelligence, which after all is only one of the gifts that people got. So Trump, like I said this yesterday, but just to repeat it, last year, or the day before yesterday I was on, Trump was like a guy who had been invited to the big boys table but didn't know how to use the silverware, didn't know which fork and knife to use. This year, he knows. Last year, after beautiful speeches of people of faith, this year, like Steve Scalise, the congressman who was shot, was there, and a soldier who had lost his eyesight in Iraq in a bombing. This very inspiring guys. And last year, after this very inspiring speech by Barry Black, the Senate chaplain, Trump got up and made this kind of cynical, remark about how, maybe we should pray for Arnold Schwarzenegger because his ratings are so bad in The Apprentice. That Trump is gone. Here's just a cut of him, and listen to this. This is a different Trump than we saw a year ago or even 6 months ago.
Our rights are not given to us by man. Our rights come from our Creator. No matter what, no earthly force can take those rights away.
That is a different tone, and I noticed this. We all noticed this in the State of the Union, that he's talking quieter. He's not hitting those big heights. He's not adding all the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful adjectives as before. There are only two possible reasons for this. One is he's bored with the presidency. He's had it with the constraints of democratic governance, and he's bored and he's getting tired and he's old. And if he's not interested, he just starts to talk like that. The other reason, which seems far, far, far more likely from a guy like Trump, is that he's doing what works. Trump is, at his core, he is a capitalist, and he's almost, in some ways, the avatar of capitalism. And I'll talk about that in a minute because it really is important. But he does what works. That has nothing to do with morality. That has nothing to do with being a high or low person. But he's figured out that when he speaks as president to a faith gathering, he has to be serious, he has to be quiet, and he has to talk about faith. It's not about Arnold Schwarzenegger's ratings, okay? Now you can say, and of course I would say, that that doesn't mean his character has changed, but that's only partly true. You know, Kurt Vonnegut wrote a book called Mother Night, and the theme of Mother Night is you become what you pretend to be. And it's very possible, I mean, the presidency, people have noticed this through the years, that the presidency elevates people, and it's very possible that a Trump who pretends to be the president will start to become, in part, the president. But let's just say, let's be cynical and just say his character remains the same, but he's changed, and he's singing a different tune. He's doing the presidency, okay? The press has not changed at all. They have not noticed for a moment that they have been hysterical from the minute he was elected, from the minute they lost the election, from the minute this guy who they didn't understand, didn't know, and didn't want became president. They have been hysterical, not just the press, but the press is the mouthpiece of the Democrat Party in general. Dan Henninger at the Wall Street Journal, he wrote a really good piece today called The Trump Panic. And he says historians will record that the Trump panic gripped all Democrats, some Republicans, scores of intellectuals, foreign leaders, journalists, and members of U.S. security agencies. On Election Day, 2 FBI officials, our friends Romeo Peter Strzok of the Bureau's Counterintelligence Division and Juliet Lisa Page, his lover, exchanged text messages. Page said, "OMG, this is effing terrifying," and Strzok responded, "OMG, I am so depressed." Henninger goes on to say, recall how routine it was then to hear or read that the new U.S. president resembled Hitler or Mussolini. Democracy was at risk, even as such non-Hitlerian pillars as Jim Mattis, Rex Tillerson, and Gary Cohn joined the government. And you can still see this overheated rhetoric is in their minds. This idea that Trump is just absolutely beyond the beyond is in their minds. Here's Eric Holder, who they say is thinking of running for president. I can't believe that. But this is the guy who is the first attorney general to be held in contempt of Congress for stonewalling them about what the administration was doing. So he exemplifies the corruption of the Obama administration. He himself called himself Obama's wingman. Just stop for a minute and imagine Jeff Sessions saying, I'm Trump's wingman. This is the attorney general saying this. He stonewalled Congress. He was held in contempt. Now, this is what he's saying about Trump.
Would you make a better president? How was that? It was pretty good, the way I snuck that in there, right?
That's pretty good. I think any one of my kids would make a better president than Donald Trump. But I think there are any number of people who would be a better president than the person we now have in the White House, who has, as I said, broken through those norms, conducted himself in a way that's inconsistent with what's best about this nation. Labeled people in very inappropriate ways, use inappropriate terms when talking about countries, turning his back on our immigrant heritage. There are any number of people who I think would be a better president than Donald Trump.
Now, Trump has done some of those things. He has, violated norms of conversation and argument, but he hasn't made like a disastrous deal with Iran. He hasn't pulled out of the Middle East and set it like ISIS on fire to burn the Middle East. He didn't sit on our economy in the name of fundamentally transforming the greatest, freest, most powerful, most generous country on earth. He didn't do any of those things. So the need for panic is a little bit, off the grid. So under this panic, Henninger goes on to talk about this, the insulated and, I believe, corrupt Obama, FBI, DOJ lost its way and started to spy on Americans and spy on an opposing political campaign because they were in a panic. And so did the media. The media had already become so partisan, even under Clinton, really. They had become partisan, certainly under Bush. But as they became partisan in support of Democrats and against Republicans, Obama used that to lure them down the road of corruption because his administration was so corrupt they had to close their eyes to corruption. These are reporters. Their whole instinct, their whole purpose in life is to get dirt on powerful people, and yet that was suppressed, not so much by the reporters, but by their bosses, and now it's suppressed by the reporters too. They have learned that their job depends on covering up for Obama. The old reporters would have quit if they were told not to cover stuff like this. Now that's not going to happen. They're going to go out out and do what they do. Cheryl Atkinson, the last reporter in America, she had this incredible description of the press, and it is exactly accurate.
We have invited some of the propagandists into our newsrooms. We allow them to dictate the talking points and messages du jour, and it's getting more difficult, I think, to find sort of down-the-middle, unbiased reporting. I've never seen anything like it. In fact, I commented that, you know, I've never in my lifetime seen open government groups and journalists so uncurious and begging not to be told about alleged or supposed violations of citizens' rights.
I mean, she's right. They are begging on air. We see them on CNN, in the New York Times, at the networks. We see them begging not to be told. Because why? Because if they're told that the Obama administration was corrupt as it was, they're also being told that they let it happen. And so, as I've said before, you know, once you start to rationalize your bad behavior, that's how you get worse. If they said, you know what, we blew the Obama administration in the name of our ideology and racial pathology, then they could start to cover Trump, as they should. And there's plenty to cover about Trump, good and bad. Some of the things he's accomplished have been absolutely terrific. Some things obviously flawed. Now we're seeing stuff about Trump that, you know, we've been worried about, we conservatives have been worried about. We see with this, the new government funding bill, it's basically paving the way for 2 years of funding the government, pushing, they say, the deficit up to Obama era levels. Now, I have to say, I'm a little bit doubtful about this because I think they are misreading, they're miscalculating the effect of the tax cuts. What they always say is, well, if you cut taxes by $1, it's going to raise the deficit by $1 because now we don't have that dollar. But the truth is, when you cut taxes, the economy booms, you collect more taxes. That's almost always true. It's on a graph, you know, you can cut too many taxes. But I do think that will cut down the deficit if they use it to that effect. And also the funding that they're approving in this new bill is not the funding that makes us bankrupt, which is entitlement funding. It's the funding that you can't turn off, the spigot you can't turn off. That's what needs to be done. But Trump has promised not to do it. So he's very big on keeping his promises to his base. I don't know if he won't do it. I don't know if he won't turn around and say, look, I made a mistake. We have to do some of this stuff. But right now, this is a scary bill that raises spending to a catastrophic level. So Rand Paul, who sometimes I like and sometimes I think is a showboat, tried to hold this bill up through procedural measures. And he made a speech, I have to say, that really did ring true, which is cut number 6.
When the Democrats are in power, Republicans appear to be the conservative party. But when Republicans are in power, it seems there is no conservative party. You see, opposition seems to bring people together and they know what they're not for. But then they get in power and they decide, we're just going to spend that money too. We're going to send that money to our friends this time. The hypocrisy hangs in the air and chokes anyone with a sense of decency or intellectual honesty. The right cries out, our military is hollowed out. Even spending has more than doubled since 2001. The left is no better. Democrats don't oppose the military money as long as they can get some for themselves. As long as they can get some for their pet causes. The dirty little secret is that by and large, both parties don't care about the debt.
So that's Rand Paul, and he's right. There's a lot of not paying attention to the debt because present money is what gets you elected. And by the time the debt comes due, in time the debt really hurts us, you'll be out of office and you don't care anymore. That's how L.A. is run. That's how California is run entirely. We're completely broke because we can't pay off our pension funds, and they're going to have to tax people in all kinds of ways to pay off those pension funds. And ultimately, the guys waiting for their pensions are going to get screwed. But we keep talking about how we have this wonderful surplus because we're taxing people so much. And it really is a question of time. So Paul is right about this. Meanwhile, the left was against this because it doesn't attach the DACA, the Dreamer bill, to the spending, right? That's what they wanted. So Nancy Pelosi got up and just made a complete buffoon of her. She can't make a buffoon of herself. She's already there. But she did this thing where this Mr. Smith goes to Washington thing where she got up and filibustered and talked about how wonderful the Dreamers are. And I just have to play this one clip because there you have Rand Paul talking sense, right? And that's the right. And now on the left, you have Nancy Pelosi talking unbelievable crap, but she's talking about how wonderful Mexican people are, I guess.
I'm reminded of my own grandson. He had a very close friend whose name is Antonio, who's from Guatemala, and he has beautiful tan skin, beautiful brown eyes, and the rest. And this was such a proud day for me because when my grandson blew out the candles on his cake. They said, "Did you make a wish?" And he said, "Yes, I made a wish." He said, "Well, what is your wish?" He said, "I wish I had brown skin and brown eyes like Antonio." So beautiful. So beautiful. The beauty is in the mix.
So would it have been beautiful if Antonio wished to have white skin? I mean, it's just nuts. You know, I don't want to insult the woman's grandson, but I mean, like, come on. She is absolutely out of her mind. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about Trump, because the reason he doesn't care about debt the way I think he should, because debt's, you know, you can't pay off government debt. It's not like we're supposed to be out of debt. It's just that out of control debt will destroy a country like it did Greece. It will destroy trust in your country and trust in, in governance and trust in your monetary system. But Trump doesn't care because he is the ultimate capitalism. And capitalism, which people don't always understand, is all about debt. It is all about credit. And there's good about that and there's bad about that. Here's Trump in the campaign. Let's just to remind you what he said about debt. He was talking about the fact, and this was something the press couldn't understand at all, that interest rates are definitely going to go up, and so we can buy back our debt at a discount. But here is what he said about debt that made a lot of news at the time.
You know, I'm the king of debt. I understand debt better than probably anybody. I know how to deal with debt very well. I love debt, but you know, debt is tricky and it's dangerous, and you have to be careful and you have to know what you're doing. But let me just tell you, if there's a chance to buy back debt at a discount, in other words, interest rates go up and the bonds go down, and you can buy debt. That's what I'm talking about.
So Trump is absolutely right about this, but the essential thing that he said is that he loves debt, but debt is dangerous, okay? So let's go back to what I said before about Trump being the living spirit of capitalism. He is the avatar of capitalism. Now, capitalism, you know, I love capitalism. It has lifted more people out of poverty than any other human system ever has. I mean, it is on track to eliminate poverty. It has expanded the sciences because capitalism needs the sciences in order to expand, and the sciences need capitalism in order to fund what they do. Capitalism includes hucksterism, overblown sales techniques. It's the best, it's the biggest, it's the greatest, come and buy it. That's Donald Trump. Capitalism involves a certain amount of immorality and cynicism, like selling trucks with Martin Luther King speeches, you know, like, Martin Luther King, buy my truck. You know, Martin Luther King said this, so buy my truck. Capitalism does that, and Trump is like that. Capitalism sometimes doesn't care what's right or wrong. It just cares what works. Trump can be like that, too. But, okay, capitalism is also faith in the future. That is the only reason capitalism exists is because people will loan money to other people to take their business, to begin their businesses in the faith and hope that that business is going to succeed and expand and create enough money to pay back that debt with interest. That is the essence of capitalism. Capitalism is based on trust. That's why when people get nervous, the stock market drops, because they're losing their trust. Now, hopefully they only lose it for a day, but they keep it in the overall system that's going forward. Capitalism is about faith in the future. And that is, yes, that includes a certain amount of cheerleading and carnival barking and a certain amount of risk too, but it also involves hope and faith. Progressives are locked in the past. Before there was technology and science and things were changing, you could make the argument that wealth was a zero-sum game. You could make the argument that the prince in his tower in his palace was in his palace because you were out in the street starving. You could make that argument. But ever since capitalism, you can't make that argument anymore, because when the princes of capitalism make money, they don't sit around in a tower. They reinvest it and they hire you to fly their private planes and take care of their pools and their houses. And they hire the rest of us, I should say, to do those things. And capitalism grows and it grows and grows. Progressives are lost in the past with this zero sum, and they're not hopeful. I've been playing that stuff all week. It's all about, oh my God, don't touch the earth because the earth will run out. Don't do this. Don't make too much money because then you're evil and people will be poor. Don't go into space. There are too many problems here. They want us to languish in fear and real conservatism, trying to conserve what we have instead of trying to go out and get more. And that's why they don't trust the people, because the people invent stuff. The people improve things. Left alone, if you give them capitalism, the people will make new stuff. They'll go in their garage and say, hey, I wonder if I could make a machine that can add. You know, I wonder if I can make a machine that can talk around the world in a single second. Trump is right about two things. Debt is dangerous, but debt is great. Credit is great. It's the basis of our system. But it's dangerous because faith is dangerous, and the future is dangerous, and change is dangerous, and giving power to the people is dangerous. And I kind of wonder if that, more than anything else, is what Trump hysteria is all about. People who are afraid of the future, people who are afraid of the people who are afraid of trusting in the capitalist system. There are all kinds of things about Trump that I dislike. I've talked about this a lot, but his capitalism is not one of them. Capitalism does make things better, even as it is ugly and huckstery and fake. And Trump, carnival barker that he is, has so far made this country better. And there's just no arguing that. This is a better country than it was a year ago. It is working better. Things are going better. And I hope that continues. We will see.